So I got a question for Dan McClellan.
All right, let's see it.
I'm reading through Exodus right now. It's my first time reading through the Bible, and there seems to be a lot of focus on how to build the Ark of the Covenant, the tent, and the surrounding decorations of the artifact in the actual book of Exodus. I'm curious what exactly is the point of this like IKEA instruction manual in the middle of this story.
Hey, thank you for a wonderful question. There are a few things to keep in mind here. First, scholars assign this part of the book of Exodus to the priestly source, or P, which is a documentary source for the Pentateuch that was probably written in the late exilic period or the early post-exilic period by members of the priestly class, or at least folks who were priestly class adjacent. So these were folks who were concerned with ritual, with purity, with holiness, with the temple. But they were also probably people who grew up in the absence of all of those things because they grew up in exile. So they only had stories about these things, and none of them had seen the Ark of the Covenant, which was probably destroyed centuries before they were born. But they had stories about them. And in the absence of ritual and cult, text and literature became one of the main locations for all of these things to play out. And so what I imagine is probably going on in the minds of priestly authors is that they see preparations for the rebuilding of the temple and the reinstitution of the temple cults and rituals and ceremonies and sacrifices and things as a kind of consecration effort. They're trying to do whatever they can to fulfill their priestly duties in the absence of the sacred space that facilitates the actual priestly duties. I think there's also a degree to which they want to put on display God's care and concern for these things to show how important they are, but also to show that God would like the details to be just right. Because in the time and the place in which the Judahites found themselves in exile, temple plans were given to a king by a deity. And so in the absence of a king, the priestly class probably enjoyed the opportunity to occupy the role of the sovereign in receiving and representing the plans for the temple to the community. So on the literary level, they are doing everything they can to act in a priestly way and to represent God to the rest of the community. So there were certainly other motivations on an individual as well as a collective level, but the two that bubble to the surface for me are, one, this desire to represent God literarily as showing great care and concern for these details and for planning how the temple is going to look when they are able to rebuild it and reinstitute temple sacrifices. And the other motivation, I think, is probably this desire to be fulfilling priestly duties in the absence of the sacred space that facilitates the fulfillment of those duties. And they probably see planning in as much detail as possible the rebuilding and the reinstitution of these ritual activities as a means of consecrating themselves to those duties. But again, certainly there are other motivations as well. And the fit for this video has been NASA.